righty. Good morning, everybody. All right, it's Thursday morning. We got what a full menu we have for you this morning, including the burning platform later on. We're joined by Sheldon Morais and by John Endres, two new, fresh additions to the burning platform. And we've still got some of your favorites coming up later on in the course of this month, including some of the return contenders. So stick around for that and a whole lot more. It's all coming right up. So we'll take a look at some of the stuff that's happening in the world. We've got some things that Mbulelo wants to get off his chest that Phumi has on the agenda, and hopefully that you want to talk about too. You can get hold of us by dropping a comment in the YouTube. That's right. Just like and subscribe and all that stuff as well, so that, you know, I tick the boxes. Literally, like and subscribing is ticking the boxes. Then I can move ahead and not get shat on by YouTube and the algorithm. This is how it works. So there we go. Good morning, Pums. How are you?
Hello. How are you boys?
Good.
I missed you guys. I can't believe it's been a whole week.
It's been a whole week already, and things are flying. I mean, it's already, the 3rd of February today? Feels like just yesterday we crossed the New Year threshold, but here we are, and it's moved fast. Mbulelo, how are you doing this morning?
Fantastic. I'm flourishing, and it's truly great to be me. It's truly great to be me. It's great to be great. It's great to be great.
All right.
All round great.
All round correct. Good start to the day.
I'm enjoying a good cup of coffee. You'll be pleased, Mbulelo, with some almond milk. I made my almond milk cappuccino, but it's really an espresso with a little bit of milk in it. It's like a mini cappuccino. You like normal, that, right?
It's not that I like it. It's that normal milk ruins a good coffee.
It even has a little bit of cinnamon in it.
Oh yes, man. Treat yourself. Treat yourself.
Right. Yeah. That's how we roll. So I've got a lot on my card this morning that I want to get to. First thing is, they're doing the census. Do you know about this?
I was going to say we must do an ad about it. Absolutely. Register yourself online, people, so you can self-enumerate. Then you don't have to deal with the strangers that are gonna come knocking.
Do we have to do any of this anyway? I mean, can't we just stay off the census? I don't love giving government any information about myself.
You don't have to give them any information so you don't have to give them your ID number. You just have to tell them, I live here, this is who I am, this is how many people live in this house, so that supposedly they can plan.
No, I don't want. I don't want any of that. I don't want to give them any more information than they already have.
So we, in our business, we use a lot of, because that information is available to businesses, and I suppose to individuals. You can also ask for it, in order to be able to run some of the projects that we do. So we currently doing a project in KZN, which is connecting a philanthropic family with a village that needs water, and an Israeli company actually that has a technology that runs boreholes, and they do the whole system so that there's water to that village. And so we use the information from the census to map out the villages that we were gonna work with and assist, and the number of people, so that we could enumerate the number of people in that area and the number of people's lives who would be impacted in the immediate, and then in the next, whatever, 5, 10, 15 years.
So I know where it comes from, that the Romans used to do this. They would count the number of people in the empire so that they could also figure out how to administrate properly, and they could appoint the right number of people. They could also have adequate representation for most of those people, particularly if they were citizens. They had a certain number of citizens, certain number of slaves. And the census used to be conducted in Rome, every 10 years, which is what we're still doing. Here we are.
5 years. Yeah, 10.
It's every 10. So thousands and thousands of years later, we're still copying an ancient Roman means of telling the public. It's interesting. I mean, my initial instinct with anything that the government want from me these days is to say no. And I know it's like a stupid rebellious streak. But I'm like, fuck you guys. You got enough info on me already. SARS has got all the info they need. I don't want to give you any more than you've already got. Is that just childish of me?
Yes.
Okay.
You know how there's like not enough roads, not enough lights, not enough too much traffic on the roads because it's all of that is about planning, right?
So
if you don't know that they are now like four ways,
yeah,
right? If you don't know how much four ways has sprouted into what it's and how many people are there and who, then you don't know how to like service that area properly.
But a part of me says that we're not counting illegal immigrants, and they're not going to want to be counted anyway, right?
They are being counted. So every individual, every human head.
What if they don't want to? Like they know the censor is coming today, so they just leave. They just go somewhere else. I know that you're probably right that I'm being childish, but like why must we give
yesterday
these guys in government, why must we give them more information? Like, haven't they already got all this information? And if they haven't, isn't that their fault? Like, we all have to have IDs, and we all have to have passports, and we all have to have tax numbers.
But that information doesn't give geographical information, because this is what the census also does.
But then what about voting records? Doesn't that give you geographical information?
That only gives you the geographical information of everybody who is registered and over the age of 18.
Yeah. See, I mean, if I had 10 children hidden in my house that I'd had with 3 women who were doing the work. They were mowing the lawn, and they were cutting down, branches of trees and planting vegetables. I wouldn't want the stupid census to know about this. Am I being really dumb, or like, do I not want these? Okay. All right.
Stop being childish. This is unfortunately one of those grown-up things that have to happen. Has to be done.
Well, I'm not going to give it. If they come knocking on my door, I'm not going to be letting them in and having a chat.
Just do it online. Here's the really fantastic news. You don't actually have to let anybody into your house. If you go and register yourself, if you go to Stats SA, register yourself, you can do all of those things all by yourself. You can find your house on the map, click on the little map. As you can hear, I've already done this.
You've already done it. Such a good citizen. What did they ask you? Just where you live and how many people live there with you?
Yeah.
Is that it?
What type of house you live in?
Oh, no, fuck you.
Yeah, like is it? Listen, I'm going to use the 4 ways example again, right? So 4 ways. 25 years ago, probably had about 100 dwellings or whatever, and now.
What's the address for this? Let me see this website. Do you know what is it?
You click through from statssa.co.za.
Okay. Let me look at this.
Okay, so what kind of house I'm living in?
You won't be able to look at. Yeah, no. So you don't have to say like I live in a big house with 6 rooms and whatever. You just have to say, is it, is it a house? Are you renting in a back room? Are you in an informal shack in the back room of in the yard that you're in? Because there are people who live there, right? So there are people who live in rooms and back rooms or garages, especially in the townships, and there are people who have mkuku, but it's in a yard, that kind of information. That's what they're asking you about. And then, or you live in a flat, or you live in a complex, or you live in a standalone house.
See, I don't know. They give that information to SARS. SARS already have that. They're already charging me, like my municipality asks me for, I think it's 4,000 Rand a month, which I get. Maybe they collect my rubbish. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I'm paying for electricity and water separately. And I don't know what that 4,000 Rand I'm giving to the municipality is for. Now, I think they're on a fishing expedition. They want more information because they want to find new ways of getting money out of us. That's all. I immediately jumped to the worst possible conclusion because Stats SA, although listen, Stats SA has always been run by very good people. Like I remember Pali Lehotla. He was very good.
Yes, I had coffee with him in December.
You see, these are all your friends. These are all your friends.
Not a friend. And this is the thing about him, right? He's not a friend, absolute stranger. Met him for the first time at the coffee, but he's got time. He's got time for, he's retired now.
Yeah.
He still does a lot of traveling. He still does a lot of consulting on the continent, in the East. He had just come back, I think, from Singapore, but he's got time for people who want information, for people who are interested, who loved it.
So he's no longer the statistician general, but whoever it is now, and I'm sure that they're very nice people.
And it's because he doesn't have a yellow suit that we don't know who he is.
But they give it to the rest of government who I don't trust at all. Right? I don't trust any of them. So, like Mike says, planning, what a laugh. The ANC only plans one thing: how to steal their money.
That's true.
Mbulelo's nodding his head. He agrees with me.
Well, it's true. We don't have to say that. It's been 27 years.
For me, if you can't convince me, how the hell are they going to convince me? I'm on the website now. They say there's still one more day to go. So I don't know where you filled in your info already.
No. So, Gareth, let me just go on the site and see.
It says here, I'm on Stats SA, and it says one more day until Census 2022. And so it hasn't opened up yet.
It is open. Hey, it is open.
It says to me it's not.
It is open, and it has actually been updated. So it's open, but they have it was supposed to close on Monday.
Yeah.
Because it's been open since last year.
Oh my God! Why does it say one more day left?
Because they have.
Look, it says 1 day. 1 day is 1 day. Census 2022. Get counted.
If you go to get counted. .statssa.gov.za.
All right. And we're going to do this in real time. Get counted. .statssa. What is it? .gov.za.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's going to open at 9 a.m.
It will be closed until 3rd of February, 9 a.m. Okay.
Yeah, so it's going to open at 9 a.m. because they had nighttime activities, you see?
Look at us.
Activities.
We're such nerds. We're already trying to get in like 3 hours before it starts. Okay, well, you know what? I'm not convinced. We'll see how it goes. I'm not convinced. I don't know whether giving them information is going to help me at all. And do I really care about giving government more info and helping them on their way? No. In fact, any government, it doesn't matter who the politicians are in charge. I don't want them to have all this information. I don't think they use it for good. I think they use it for evil. Sorry. Nobody's coming in my yard. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What do they do with like the yuppies in Danefern? They're like, those people don't want their next door neighbors in their house. Forget people coming in through a gate like that, or do we just presume they're going to do it online?
No, actually, you cannot. So you cannot refuse.
Oh, I have done.
Yes, because again, it's legislated, right? So it's kind of like refusing the police. So even the people in like Stain City with their biometric.
You see now
they're not going to be able to say no. They're not letting people in.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not playing along at all. The moment they say, "Oh, well, you can't refuse," and I'm
it's on the form. Corona's boring. Corona's boring is saying if she self-identifies as they them.
Yeah.
How do they put that on the form?
You can choose that as well. Okay, no, I'm totally out of this. Sorry, you will not see me on a Statistics South Africa number. You won't find me. I'm not gonna. I will not. I refuse to comply. Especially if there's this threat of force like lurking there in the background. They're like, "Ooh, you can't say no." Oh yes, I can. Watch me. I'm gonna find a way around this now, just to piss them off. Sorry, Pums. You've done exactly.
Good luck.
No, I'm not doing it. No, I'm absolutely not doing it. And if they say to me, "You have to," I'm gonna say to them, "All right, you want to fight with me today? Because you're just a You're like an admin clerk. You're someone who's been hired by the government to come and get information. You're going to have a terrible day, especially when you come to my door. I'm not going to work with these guys. Sorry.
Okay.
There we go. That one's dealt with. So that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about this morning. The other one is, like, I saw all these people. We should really save this for the burning platform, because we're so obsessed in this country with like who has the office, right? But I saw someone on TV yesterday who I wish we could just speed it into the Chief Justice position. Do you know who this is?
Judge Maya.
Yes. I love her. She is the Supreme Court of Appeal Judge President at the moment, and she is one of the people who is standing for election to the top job, right? The Chief Justice. And just the other day, I was moaning about Joe Biden saying he's going to elect the first black woman because to him, this is a way of getting points with his base. But he doesn't actually care whether that person's qualified or not. And this is exactly what Judge Maya said yesterday. And I love her for this. I mean, I kind of knew very tangentially who she was. But she was asked directly by one of the people at the JSE, the Judicial Services, JSC, Judicial Services Commission. She was asked, do you feel like as a black woman, it's your time to be considered for this? And she was like, I don't know who these people are who consider whether or not women are ready or black women are ready for this job, because we're as competent as anyone else. And she has an extraordinary record as a judge, and I'm very, very impressed with her. And she is precisely the kind of person who, on merit alone, should be at the top of the list. There's some good candidates. There's Dunstan Mlambo, who's the judge president here in the North Gauteng division, and also a very, very qualified person. There's Judge Zondo, who we speak about often on the show. And there's her. Now, all three of those people, fantastic. I don't even know who the fourth candidate is. Do you?
Sorry, I had been cut off, so I didn't hear which ones you mentioned.
So I mentioned Dunstan Mlambo. I mentioned Zondo, and I mentioned Maya. Who are the others?
Okay. I will tell you.
Because I just love that these three are good candidates, but particularly that the woman in this case is, not because I care about equity, because I don't, but because I think that they're all really qualified for this position, especially Judge Maya, and I like her attitude the most. And she just was she was completely unfazed by any of the questions. She didn't get all feely or touchy about all the usual things. I mean, if you consider how these interviews went in the first stage, and we saw some terrible, terrible possible candidates who were clearly there just because they wanted to find women. This Judge Maya is so good. Anyway, if you haven't seen her, and if you missed all those hearings yesterday, you actually missed something interesting. I would never watch the JSC hearings normally, but this was good, and she was impressive, and I'm glad I saw a little bit of it. You agree, Pums?
So Justice Madlanga.
Okay, I don't know.
Russell Buyiseli Madlanga.
Okay, don't know him, but good to see that we've got people like Maya there. And I really hope she gets
He's in the
job.
Constitutional Court. He's one of the Constitutional Court judges.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Didn't know about him. So I should know him better than the others, but for some reason I don't. Okay, very good. Anyway, the SCA, the Supreme Court of Appeal, by the way, has a record of producing the very best judges and the least political judges, because the SCA doesn't deal with many political issues. Most of the constitutional issues, in fact, all of them should go straight to the Constitutional Court. But the SCA deals with all the other criminal and civil matters that get taken all the way up the rung. And those judges are very smart people. So the Supreme Court of Appeal is usually a great place to look for judges, and for the least political judges. So it's interesting. I mean, obviously, your Chief Justice has to have some grip of politics. But we said the other day when we were talking about Lindiwe Sisulu, and how the whole judiciary has written this letter of kind of holding her in contempt for her comments about the judiciary. I mentioned at the time that the only problem I have with that is that now if Lindiwe Sisulu wants a fair trial in some matter, she's not going to get a fair judge because they've already expressed their opinion about her. the deal we have with the judges, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, Phumi or Mbulelo. The deal we have with them is, okay, we won't do anything in respect of questioning your judgment once you've judged in a case. We will take the judiciary as a body very seriously, and we will not attack judges individually, which we try not to do in South Africa. We won't make it personal. In return, you don't comment on political stuff. You only comment on your cases and only within the case, in curia. You don't talk about it outside of there. And there's this respect that we have then. You've got an appointment for life, usually as a judge, and we take you seriously. We will consider any comment that you make to be a comment from the bench generally, but you don't comment on political stuff. It's kind of this arrangement we have. You agree? Keeps
Certainly.
the judiciary clean. It's the one place we don't want politics.
You know, yesterday at the office we had a whole a heated conversation about that, because what we were and one of the guys that I work with was saying to me that, you know, the thing about the system, and as with all systems, right, is the various aspects of it kind of compensate for each other and work themselves out eventually, right? So it kind of balances somewhere along the line. Because I just, you know, for me, there were so many fascinating things about all of the cogs that we're seeing, or the spokes that we're seeing in the wheels of how South Africa runs at the moment. And just watching these interviews and seeing who gets to ask questions. And even yesterday, I think with Judge Maya, there were moments where there was definitely in her head an eye roll or two at some of the questions that she was being asked. And it was like, oh, really? But also, you know, I'm kind of sitting there and thinking, it's interesting that Julius gets to sit there and be one of the people who gets to like throw jabs, because he has a couple of pending matters. So he has a vested interest in how this thing goes. You know, and I was just like,
he probably wants the dumbest judges he can find in the judiciary, because then he can win with his lawyers.
And that's the, you know, what the guys were trying to convince me about, that the system kind of balances itself out. So there's that small group of people who get to sit there. And in fact, the example that I made to them was, I would far rather have had Makaula, you know, the old lady that's in the EFF, that's a parliamentarian for the EFF. I would far rather have her sitting there asking questions, because I think she would be more representative of a lot more of us and how we feel about
as opposed
the judiciary, and how and the questions that you would want to ask of the kind of person that eventually becomes, you know, the equivalent of King Solomon.
Yeah, and this is where we don't get to choose. We get to elect people to parliament, and then they form their own subcommittees, and they elect themselves onto these JSCs and other bodies that determines other parts of the government. I don't know that that it's all about representation at this point. I'd also like some qualified people there, because I think it would be important for people on the Judicial Services Commission to have some grasp of how the law works. And I don't know whether they go for training in this, but I know that the courts are a very important part of what we do. And the courts are a bulwark in this country against the irresponsible use of power by the other two branches, the legislature and the executive. And it's important that we have good people in there. And it's important that we have people who are not political, who cannot be manipulated from the outside, and who can judge fairly and squarely.
Which is part of why I find that the question about if South Africa is ready for a female judge so horrible, right?
It's
because
horrible.
actually, South Africa at large hardly ever interfaces with the Chief Justice, right? It is the other jurists.
Yeah.
It's their peers. And they have been, you know, you've been a judge for 20 years or whatever it is. And now suddenly somebody is asking you, do you actually think like your colleagues can handle working with the woman? Do you think, like, what the fuck? in 2022. This is a question
Yeah.
in 2022.
And
Anyway.
they must have thought, what a great question. You know, people who ask those types of questions immediately think everyone's going to stand up and clap here once I ask a woman question and I threw black in there.
Yeah, it's
oh
pure
my
populism.
God.
Yeah.
Like she
And-
has been a judge. She has been working with other judges. She's been working with lawyers and advocates. She's been working within the profession all her professional life.
Yeah,
But they ask her a dumb question like that because they think they're going to get the points for it. That's why maybe these things shouldn't be televised. I mean, I enjoyed watching her yesterday because she acquitted herself so well. But
they should.
But
They should be televised because
we shouldn't allow the political grandstanding. You know,
then we know who not to vote for. Then we know who not to vote for. That's what you get to see. You get to see it laid bare.
Good point.
Yeah, you know, an interesting thing about living in South Africa is that we're pretty much following the same pattern of countries that have had liberation the way we got it. It's not like special what we're having. Is we actually did it the wrong way. Because as brutal as it was, what you probably need, you need to do the ugly stuff early, and we've gone soft early, and now we're trying to pull it back. The law is only as applicable as the appetite of those in power. And I think you touched on that just now, is that I find it very difficult to take serious people seriously anymore in South Africa because I just don't know anymore. Like in Singapore, they were very clear up front. Corruption, you've even been inducted, you're away, you're not close to anything. And maybe it is short-sighted of me and myopic, but all of this just seems like a charade for me for another 80, 100 years because I just can't take serious people seriously anymore because I don't know who you're in bed with.
Well, what I was pleased to see is that Judge Maya, who is a black woman, just dismissed all those questions about being black and about being a woman. It wasn't about that for her at all. She's like, I've been doing this anyway for a long time. And yes, it's important that I took leave when I was pregnant, but they haven't thought about these things. We will figure them out. She's like, we'll get to those things. Very practical about it. Didn't pander to this bullshit of like, you know, as a woman or whatever, because we know how that goes, right? We know where that leads. It does nothing for, it's just trying to score cheap political points. And that's also why I don't like what Biden is doing in America. And I would prefer them to look at us and go, they're actually getting it right in that country by finding the right person. And then also ticking those boxes for the people who are looking for those boxes to be ticked. Anyway,
who asked that question? Sorry, was it a journo or
no? Journalists.
No. It's the council.
These are only people in the Judicial Services Commission.
She should have said, Yazin, get out. And I think everyone would have been fine with it.
She can't do that. No, she
get
can't
out.
Do that. She can't. And
what an incredibly.
She was very much figuratively rolling her eyes.
She did have a.
Oh, Jess. Teeth.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
No, she definitely had an intellectual eye roll. And in her response, she also had that response that kind of goes, okay.
Let me explain to you. Yeah.
Like you were 5-year-old.
Yeah, correct.
I'm with you.
It was so wonderful.
All right. We got lots of other things to cover, and we've kind of taken up all of the space in this. By the way, I was stuck in some traffic yesterday, like heavy traffic, and I was like, "What's going on the way to this appointment and on the way back?" And I suddenly realized,
At what time?
No, it was a lunch appointment, so I left probably about 11:15, and I got there just in time, and this was in Waterfall, and then I came back like 2. And I was stuck again. And
it's all the people picking up their kids.
It wasn't like there were accidents, or it was slow as can be. And I just thought, oh, not again. Here we go. I thought, at least during coronavirus, there was less traffic.
So the good news is that all kids are back to school full time.
Okay,
so
good.
that 2:00 traffic might have been like parents picking up.
Good.
And all of that. So that's one thing. But Gareth, before you go to the news, I have to this is like a small ad break. I think in our show we need a 2-minute, like we used to have Sia's Good News.
Yes.
I think we need a 2-minute book review.
A book review.
I think
Well-
we need a 2-minute book review, guys, because I'm busy with Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run.
Oh yeah,
It's worth it, guys.
you should speak to Rena, because Rena watched Bruce Springsteen. She was like 3 rows from the front at his stage show in New York, which I think was also called Born to Run, based on his whole life story and everything. And he performed live, and
Yeah.
it was sold out pretty much from beginning to end. And she said it was one of the best shows she's ever been
It's
to.
a Broadway.
Yeah.
I think he did a Broadway kind of presentation, as they will call it in America.
You must talk to her about that. She said it was absolutely phenomenal. So there we go.
He wears something called, so in South Africa, for our international audience, there's a difference between jeans and ipogat. So that guy wears ipogat. That guy's such a boss. He's literally the boss.
He is the boss.
What's the difference?
Oh, okay. So jeans are what these cool kids wear, washed, whatever. You know what I mean? Ipogat is, imagine your 501 straight cut, sort of white dad with his New Balance tackies. Yeah. And Springsteen is still getting them with the same look that he's got. He got them with that look in 1980. He's killing them with that look now. And that guy makes it look awesome. Yeah, Springsteen. Yes, it's that guy. Oh my goodness.
Listen, guys, listen. So I will admit, all right. So I obviously now know lots of Springsteen, know the music, know some of the story, but I knew very little about Bruce Springsteen, also because he's a bit older, right? He's not like in my generation of music.
No.
He's a bit older and he's a white guy. So it's like white music and older. It like took me a while to get to know about his music and get to understand him, and and even then, so probably for about maybe about 20 years, I've known Bruce Springsteen's music, and you love it because it's rock and roll. Rock and roll's black music, yo, and he got it, he got the right kind of. And so I don't know a lot about Bruce. I don't know a lot about his early life. I don't know a lot about his influences or how he got to where he got. And so this book is unbelievable for a person like me who likes the music. But I can imagine for a person who likes the music and likes the man and has been part of the story, it'll blow your mind. And also because he's such a fantastic writer, he's got a way with words. The imagery in this book is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Every single sentence is a gift.
Well,
that's my book. That's my book.
You kind of you started this book thing unwittingly the last time we had you on, or it could have been the first week of the year when we started the show, and you were talking about that book about dreams. Do you remember?
About dreams?
Yeah.
I don't remember. Listen,
I'm sure you brought up a dreams book or something.
Consume a lot of books. Last week we spoke about Big Magic.
That's right. Big Magic came up as well. So I think you've already done 3 of these books. Yeah. So now we must keep a list. All right. So Mbulelo, you've got your turn next week, Thursday, to bring one of the books you're reading.
Sure. I can do that.
I'm telling you, kids. Telling you, kids.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I like this.
It's a good read.
And a starting place for anyone getting into Springsteen, Dancing in the Dark. What you got to do, though, is you have to watch the video. Don't listen to it or stream it. Dancing in the Dark, the video. Oh, come on with it. I said, Bruce, get it. Dancing in the Dark. You got to. That's the entrance. That guy.
I don't have.
He talks about it in the book.
Don't have a lot of headlines for you this morning, but you want to hear some of these things that are going on?
Yes,
absolutely.
All right. So first things first. Mangosuthu Buthelezi discharged from hospital. That's good news. 93 years old. This man is made of some really tough stuff. He was admitted to hospital after suffering from hypertension. In a short statement, he thanked the public for support. We're pleased to report that after a brief period of recuperation and resting, he's been given a clean bill of health and was discharged from hospital yesterday. They also thanked the medical team that treated him. It's good to have him back home, where he is preparing for an upcoming opening of Parliament and State of the Nation address. He doesn't stop, eh? This guy's he's unbelievable. I love it. Strong. Uzaba strong.
Get them.
Boris Johnson says that they will look into Bain's conduct in South Africa with urgency. I saw such a funny video someone sent me this morning of Boris Johnson taking a run through London,
dear.
all on his own with his dog.
For what reason?
Well, because he's fat, obviously.
As an exercise thing?
Yeah. He's going for a run early in the morning.
Wow.
Like, it was still dark. I think it was either yesterday or the day before. But he was going for an early morning run, and someone goes, "Hello, Prime Minister," as he runs past, running with his little dog. I like that. He's a hilarious human being. I mean, if he wasn't Prime Minister, he'd be a lot funnier. The fact that we actually have to take him seriously is outrageous because he's not a serious-looking person. Okay, lots of comments here about Bruce Springsteen. Phumi, you've started a thing now.
Guys, do it. Read the Bruce.
Zach says, I have a vast collection of classic rock, but unfortunately, Bruce is the one artist I find hard to sink my teeth into, no matter how much I try. Maybe this book will be my redemption. So Zach is in a position where he needs more convincing. Sanele says, Mbulelo, Bruce Springsteen is the poster child, or should I say poster dad for Ibogart.
Yeah, Nepatu, exactly.
Nepatu. Yeah.
And he's had, I can't say enough. I hope I age like this guy, I'm telling you. I hope I can just carry it through now and people will think I'm cool when I'm 75 or wherever Bruce is now. Oh, man.
Mm-hmm. This is an interesting fact Jared brought us. For all his success, Bruce Springsteen has never had a number one single. Closest he got was number 2.
Wow.
I love Springsteen's music. I really do. He's also quite a political guy. You know, Steve mentions, I went off of Bruce Springsteen when I found out he's a Biden guy.
So this I found fascinating, right? Because all his music, from what we've heard, what I'd known up until I read this book, his music has a point of view. You know, it tells, and this was a large part of his appeal, right? Is it tells stories of everyday working Americans, blue collar life, and has a point of view. But the man was a fucking hippie.
Oh yeah, big time. Big time. Mm-hmm.
Almost all his life. In
Yeah.
fact, he tells a story of his dad pulling him in when he started growing his hair to say to him, listen, lad, are you queer? Like, and all the times that because of the long hair that he and most of the band had for all those many years, how badly they were treated, because everybody was just like, we're not treating long hairs around here. Hippie.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating, but that's also growing old does that.
And you know what his appeal is, especially to me, because I'm a dude, you know. It's like he just feels like a dude you could have a brewski with. Yeah. Whereas a lot of guys, when they get famous, they get weird. They start getting weird. You know what I mean? He just seems like I said, Bogart, let's go, guys. Let's grab a couple of pints. Everyone go home.
I mean, I love his songs also. All of those stories are kind of middle America, kind of, as you mentioned, Phumi, blue collar America songs. You know, he sings about like glory days. I think it's just such a perfect example because it's all about those people who just never get past high school. You know, it's like the quarterback in the high school football team who that's his glory day. That's the greatest he'll ever be. After that, his life goes downhill. Or the sorority queen, very American stuff that we in South Africa don't maybe associate ourselves with as much, but we can understand from movies and from TV. And he articulates the position really well. You know, kind of my favorite song of his, Hungry Heart, which is like, got a wife and kids in Baltimore, Jack. I went out for a ride and I never went back. You know, it's these stories about like this guy who's just living this ordinary life in America. It's not about.
He is the ultimate people watcher.
Yeah.
He is the ultimate people watcher and kind of knows how to create these vignettes in his music about all of those people and their lives. Because that's like.
Yeah, you're almost looking at, you're people watching with him. That's what the songs are. It's good
or
stuff.
You recognize yourself. Or you recognize yourself.
Now you've made me want to go and listen to a whole lot of Springsteen. Damn. I didn't.
Do you have any Levi 501s? That would be the only way to listen to it. Actually.
Yeah. I also, you were talking about that just now. And I was thinking, in my 20s, I used to wear those jeans that were fashionable, that were like ripped and faded, and there was paint on them at one stage, and
those are jeans.
Everybody had those, right?
Yes.
But I think since I turned 35, even I wear jeans that are plain.
Bogart. No, you stopped wearing jeans. Well, you must get the terminology right. You were wearing jeans in your 20s. Okay, Bogart now. Straight cut. You're not trying to do too much with a bootleg flare. You know what I mean? It's called a Bogart. Straight cut. When you start to wear them with New Balance, if people are struggling to conceptualize Bogart, next time you go to the rugby game, the white dad he's rocking with the like a collar, just your golf collar, and New Balance. The jeans, what he's wearing, Bogart.
In between the golf shirts and the New Balance.
Yeah, Bogart.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Lots of people talking about Mangosuthu Buthelezi and how just unbelievably strong the man is. Yep, he is. He's made of stuff that I don't know if they make too many people like that anymore. Right?
Tough times, guys. Tough times make tough men.
So the other bit of news, and we have to talk about this because there's practical stuff. I want to ask Dory to get Leighton Beard from the Automobile Association, the AA, on. They eventually fixed that card machine. So now we can get our driver's licenses. But I saw a news story yesterday about how the insurance companies are saying, if your license expired, you have a license, but it expired, and you're waiting for a new one, they will be lenient. In other words, they will, let's say you get in a bumper bashing or there's an accident. Normally, they would just repudiate your claim, your insurance claim, because you don't have a valid license.
But I don't even this last week.
Yeah, I don't know why we even have to have renewed licenses every 5 years. What's that all about? Or 10 years or whatever it is. Like, surely once you can drive, you can drive. And then obviously when you're very old, then you have to hand in your card.
But also when you go and renew that license, there is absolutely nothing happens other than filling in forms and standing in the queue.
Yeah. Right. So it's just a money-making exercise. It's rent-seeking. So I don't know why. I reckon once you get your license, do other countries do this? Once you get your license, you should just have it until they can prove otherwise. If you get pulled over by the police because you can't drive properly, and then they say to you, we're going to
It's a money-making racket.
That's a money-making racket. Like, why do we have to go and keep renewing? Why must we stand in a queue every 10 years to get this new card? Why?
Is it even 10 years? I don't think it's 10 years.
I don't know. Mine expired in January last year.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's like, why do bank cards expire, by the way? Same thing.
Well, I think that's just so that if you have those debit orders that are being stubborn and you've stopped, you were trying to cancel them, that eventually you get to cancel your card. But you could probably do that anyway without it expiring on its own.
But who cares? Either I'm with the bank or I'm not. Why does my card expire in 2026? So it's the same idea to me.
As Phumi says, you don't go into the licensing center and get tested again. You don't have your eyes tested. Nobody's doing anything to check that you still can drive. They just ask you for money and give you a new card, which is ridiculous. I was pulled over by the police on Saturday last week. They had a roadblock and they were just pulling over random cars. Guys pulled me over. They're like, let's see your license. So I said, expired in January last year. And they were like, the machine's broken. You can go. So what's the point? What's the point?
God.
Right?
LOL, as the kids are saying.
Daniel says other countries do it too. Australia's licenses are 10 years. South Africa's 5. Oh, it's every 5. Even worse. Even worse. Theron says driver's license expires every 5 years. Jesus. Really? I mean, really. Yeah. Mike says they do test your eyes, Phumi.
Oh, really?
Where?
Don't remember. Where?
Okay.
Where's Mike living?
Can you just come with your own eye test? Like I just had my eyes tested. Can I just come with the...
Yeah. You can bring your own. You can do that. Cook and Tracy and Ruth, they're all saying they test your eyes. But Cheryl says it's ridiculous. I had to redo my eye test. Obviously, I failed. I think
Hi.
everyone failed. And they had to leave and go to the optometrist. It's a money-making thing.
Had to leave and go to the optometrist to do what?
This is news to me as well. And I am as blind as a bat.
Well, Buv says Specsavers do the driver's eye test for free.
Also, Cheryl, maybe a good thing for everyone else that you went and had to redo it.
No.
You don't knock over kids at 4 ways more. So what happened? Oh, I didn't know I was blind.
So David says the license doesn't expire, only the card does. But that, you get my point. Like, why do we have to keep renewing the card every 5 years? Still, it doesn't make sense. All right. They say that here's another person trying to make excuses for them. Xbox saying it's a money-making thing, but also a person can change a lot in 5 years. So it also updates your photo. Oh, come on.
Oh, yes.
Really?
Oh, yeah. People change in 5 years. Oh, my. Yeah. I bumped into someone. Oh, sorry. I bumped into someone at the shops a couple of days ago. It's like, hey, Mbulelo. I'm like, hi, person I've never met in my whole entire life.
Meanwhile, it was?
It's so-and-so. What?
It changed so much.
Yeah, like, wow, you've changed a lot. And I didn't recognize you at all.
I'm afraid to ask if they changed for the better or the worse. I'm scared.
Describe the change. Like, you didn't recognize them at all?
Yeah, no, but I mean, like, at all. There's more of them now.
That's
quite a bit more.
And just
it was from what she used to look like, and I was like, oh my word! I nearly pulled a heavens, but I managed to stop myself. So that's a good point. On the people changing, that's
you didn't know who this person was.
No, Gareth. Imagine I saw you and Phumi in 5 years. How we've been working together this long. And in 5 years' time, I just walked past you and you're like, Mbulelo. And I was like, huh? You're like, it's Gareth. Gareth who now? How do you know me? Was my kind of response. It was startling, yeah. So that's actually a good point in case someone does calm. Yeah, it was stunning. Sorry. You got me there. And I didn't want to be mean, but she had changed. And I wasn't being offish, but I didn't know who she was.
You didn't want to be mean? You didn't want to be mean?
She caught me off guard. It was crazy how she's changed. If she had been like a murderer, we wouldn't have been able to catch her with her old photo.
Really?
There's no way. No ways. No. It was... Gareth, I didn't recognize her. I mean, she was a stunner 5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
In my eyes. And now I wouldn't have been, I wouldn't.
That's terrible.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I didn't want to be mean. I was shooketh.
And right there, that moment of I don't want to be mean. I for one am impressed with you, Mbulelo. That sounds like growth.
It does. Yeah, I suppose it does.
Have you ever heard Mbulelo not want to be mean?
This is the first time. Let's put it that way. That's very good. So you've also changed, Mbulelo.
It was a bit awkward for me. I was the victim because, when you do that thing, and now she can see what's happened now. Like, she knows what's going on. She has a mirror. She knows why I can't recognize her. And there's that awkward moment of,
wow.
Oh, flip. Good to see you. Like that. And it was just like, oh my goodness. Let me go get some gherkins. Make me feel better. It's very awkward. Very awkward.
Sounds terrible.
It was
your reaction, you couldn't fake that you did recognize her. Because sometimes I can do that. I'll be like, I'll see someone and I don't know who the hell they are. And they'll be like, hey, Gareth. And I'll think, okay, it's just someone who recognizes me from TV or whatever. But you actually knew this person, and she was going to know that you didn't know her, that you didn't recognize her.
like I say, it would be like me walking past you in 5 years' time. She wasn't someone who was way out of my social circle. She's somebody who we were fellow constituents on the social scene, like very much in and amongst each other. Right. The sort of, anyway.
All right. A couple of things I just want to quickly get to before we start the burning platform for this morning. Jeff Zucker of CNN walked away from them on Wednesday after failing to disclose a consensual relationship with a staffer. Do not have sex with people who work with you. This guy, who, by the way, has not done a good job of running CNN, because as we might know, even if you aren't paying that much attention, CNN's ratings have slid down the toilet recently. They also had to fire Chris Cuomo recently. Looks like they're going to have to fire a whole bunch more people. They had like a pedophile on the staff who was producing TV shows and, taking like 9-year-olds away for, in inverted commas, camps. And now they've got this creep, Jeff Zucker, as well. But he should be fired because he's bad at running CNN. He shouldn't be fired because of penis and vagina stuff. But there we go. Any comments on that?
When are men going to learn? When are you going to learn? Especially a guy like him. You've got so many options. You've got so many options. You're the head of CNN.
No. Guys, he wasn't fired because he didn't tell. Just like tell HR.
He resigned. Yeah, he resigned.
Nah.
He was pushed. He was pushed. He resigned, but he was pushed, It's just tell someone. Just tell someone.
Because you know how people are at work now.
HR.
But now Melanie's going to say, have you heard?
No, but the reason that policy exists is because they are trying to what? Stay away from lawsuits.
Yes, that's right.
And now here you are the boss, and you are keeping us like, this is precarious stuff. If something goes sour with your relationship and we didn't know it was a relationship, and one of you decides to sue the channel for not protecting it from like your predatory ways, there's no way that like the channel can say, oh, hang on, it was consensual all along. Just tell HR.
Okay, you make a good point. And Phumi, you know this because you've worked in corporates before. I mean, I don't know that Mbulelo and I have that level of experience, so we don't actually know what the rules are.
You don't have to tell anybody except HR. Just tell HR.
So Stink Mina, speaking from experience here, says, don't have entanglements with your colleagues. I learned that the hard way.
Ooh. Now we want to know more.
Me too.
Ruth says, I love Phumi. She's an absolute light, and I love her laughter. There's some nice comments for you.
But that was very funny, Mbulelo. That moment, I had to get a tissue. My eyes were watering. I don't know if I'm going to...
I'm glad my promo brought you joy.
Here's an interesting thing I want to throw into the mix too. Johns Hopkins University has concluded that global lockdowns have had a much more detrimental impact on society than they have produced any benefit, with researchers urging that they are ill-founded and should be rejected as a pandemic policy instrument. There's an objective viewpoint from a university that has cred and that is actually, in the beginning, they said lots of positive things about lockdowns. Now that the dust has settled, we can look back and on this research that they've just put out, which you can actually read on their website. I like the fact that they're saying here, they have not produced any benefit, much more detrimental in impact, and should be rejected as a pandemic policy instrument. Well, let's learn from our mistakes. I hate to say it, but I did say this in March of 2020. I was against lockdowns from the get-go, and now finally there's some vindication for me and other people, including many of the listeners of this show, who agreed at the time that these are not good ideas. So go and look at that from Johns Hopkins University and see for yourself, now that the dust has settled, there's no more debate. If these eminent researchers have done all the number crunching and have looked at the results of lockdowns, which they have in detail, far more than you and I have with our pedestrian point of view, go and read it. And it should put your mind at ease about the fact that lockdowns were a fucking disaster. And just while talking about fucking disasters, here's something fun for you before we get to the burning platform. Take a look at Boris explaining his party that he had at number 10.
I thought you were going to show us the run.
No, this is even better for me. Here's Boris Johnson talking about his his party that he had during lockdown while he was forcing other people to stay at home.
You got to fight for your right to party. I wake up late for work, man, I don't want to go. I ask Carrie please, but she still says no. Helga, this fucking lockdown tried to say that it's work. Now even hardline Tories think you're some kind of jerk. You got to fight for your right to party. That time I misled the Queen and I said, no way.
Well, that hypocrite lies 10 times a day.
Man, being PM is such a drag. Since now it's away your best form lag. Osgood, you got to fight for your right to party.
Well, you get the idea. Boris Johnson, fight for your right to party with some cameo appearances from other Tories and from the Queen.
Stellar stuff.
That's
Stellar
great.
stuff.
See, that is where we really can have a good time, despite all the irritating things that governments all over the world have done, because we mustn't take ourselves too seriously and we mustn't take them too seriously. So many people did at the start of the pandemic. So many people thought, governments are the way to go. They know what they're doing. Well, haven't those people come a cropper? Haven't those people learned some horrible lessons? And obviously, there's still countries that are going along with this. I mean, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, still carrying on as if their government's got their best interests at heart. We'll keep you safe. That's what they say. People are so keen to be safe that they'll give up just about anything for it.
Oh, okay. Before we cannot go without reading Yanda's comment.
Okay. Where is that? Yonder's comment. You can have entanglements at work. Just choose the right person. I've had a few and they all worked out and were super awesome. Yonder. Oh my God.
Incredible.
All right.
Incredible.
Spicy.
We will have to pick that up later, because coming up in the next hour is the Burning Platform. We've got 2 brand new guests for you this morning with lots of insight into all the stories that you're interested in this week. We will be joined, of course, by Phumi Mashiko, who's my colleague in the Burning Platform, my cohort,
fellow constituent,
stakeholder.
Stakeholder.
Fellow stakeholder.
The one holding the steak or the one holding the knife? Which one?
Stakeholder. All right, all of that and more on the way. Stick around. JeffCentral.com. People said that he was basically Hitler's 2IC. And he built up the Einsatzgruppen, and he built these extermination camps.
The world's greatest mass murderer. He enjoyed chess, the harpsichord, stamp collecting. He set quotas for the concentration camps of how many people you need to kill.
He went and looked through a little keyhole as they gassed a number of people.
Him and his mistress sitting, drinking tea and with cutlery made from bones.
Yo, I put it like wow, this that sound. These oaks don't work hard like me, I hope they know by now.
Okay, it is time for the Burning Platform, which of course is every Thursday morning we get to unpack all the big issues of the week. We're going to be joined this morning by two new guests on the show. Phumi, of course, is here with me, and we would love to hear your comments too. So make sure you leave a comment in the YouTube comment section. Also, like and subscribe, etc., etc. We need to do that. So let's get cracking this morning. We have some fresh meat this week on the Burning Platform with two guests who I'm very, very happy to welcome to the show. First of these is Sheldon Morais, who is well known. He's the assistant editor for breaking news at News 24, so no stranger to the audio world, having been as a career journalist at Eyewitness News and the occasional stand-in stint on 702. Sheldon, it's nice to see you. How are you?
Fine, thanks, and you, Gareth.
Good.
Great to
good.
be on the platform.
Thank you. Nice to have you here. We're also joined by John Endres, who is the new CEO of the Institute of Race Relations at the IRR. He's previously worked for the Friedrich Naumann Stiftung and is one of the founding CEOs of the Good Governance Africa Advocacy Organization. It's very nice to see you, John, and thank you for joining us this morning too.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
Good, good. All right, listen, guys, there's so much to get into. I don't want us to waste a single second of this. Phumi is very excited. She always reads from cover to cover state capture reports, and she's got a nice pithy second edition to get stuck into. It came out 2 days ago. We still haven't completely digested.
I've only read one of three.
Listen, you love it, Phumi. Thank God you love it, because no one else can be bothered to read the thing. And it is fairly important. It's easy for us to dismiss this and to say, well, look, most of South Africa doesn't really care about what the contents of this report are. Most South Africans probably couldn't even tell you what the State Capture Commission was, even though it's getting quite a lot of airtime. We should be more interested maybe than we are. But there is interesting information in here. There are, of course, the recommendations, which is the part that everyone skips to first. But there's lots that's going on in the analysis and in the facts of these state capture reports, which is probably more important because that's where the real story is. You get to see who gets mentioned the most. You get to see which organizations deserve the lion's share of the blame. And South Africans also, maybe this is also a media fault, we tend to jump to conclusions, guys, and we tend to look for the easy scapegoats here. Everybody is now, Jacob Zuma's the worst person in the world, the Guptas, easy targets. And of course, these are people on the public radar, and they're also people who deserve a lot of the blame for what's happened. They were people who stole most of the money and put the machinations in place in order for state capture to happen. But there are lots of other people that come out in these reports who we think less about, and we mention less. And some of these are organizations that have enormous international credibility and should have a similar amount of blame laid at their door. I'm talking about the Bains, the McKinseys. These are huge businesses that continue to make massive amounts of money from governments all over the world. McKinsey, for example, I'm appalled at how they drew up the blueprint for so much of this stuff. And they still have some cred in certain places. McKinsey should be hounded out of our country with whips and pitchforks and burning torches. And yet, they seem to have come out of this largely unscathed. They should be as much in the dog box as the Guptas and the Zumas. Don't you guys agree?
I think you could say that, yeah.
Who wants to go first? John, you go.
Okay. Yeah. So I think you make a good point, because the focus is very much on the government side of the corruption and the shenanigans that went on during state capture. But of course, there are always two parties to a scandal like this. And as in many cases in the past, I think we see that big business really demonstrates quite a low level of qualms about getting involved in these kinds of acts. And the McKinseys and the Bains have been quite prominently mentioned in these reports. I think some large auditing companies were also fingered at earlier stages of state capture. Mm-hmm. And what tends to happen then is that they say that they'll do some internal investigations. Maybe they pay back some of the fees that they collected from the state with interest, and then they hope that will absolve them. I don't know if that's quite enough. Would that be enough if it were a smaller company, or is it enough if it's a government department?
Yeah, good questions. Unfortunately, there's not enough curiosity around the answers. What do you think, Sheldon?
I agree. I agree in both your characterization of it, John's description of it as well. That corruption doesn't happen in a void. There's usually two parties in this instance of state capture. There were numerous parties involved. And we had McKinsey paying back some of the money. Bain is in the spotlight at the moment due to its the findings that have come out against it. I think one of their partners at the stage, was simply relocated elsewhere. And they're saying, our findings, our independent findings, were that all was above board. Nothing went wrong. It was this one person who happened to meet the president quite a few times in a very short period of time, and there isn't enough. I suppose there isn't enough action. While the coverage may be there, and the media, by all accounts, needs to also take some responsibility here, because it's easy to focus on the political figures, on the Gupta figures, and while a lot has been done, you obviously need to hone in on that. Explain to people who these characters are, how it all happened, and why it was important in the concept of state capture. And then there's obviously the prosecution. There has to be some sort of repercussions, whether it's judicial, whether it's in some sort of internal sector actions, but there has to be.
Yeah, I look at the way that the business case for so much of what happened and obviously this part of the State Capture Commission the reports is all about Denel, Transnet, other state-owned enterprises. A lot of the business case for state capture was made by these international consulting firms, and they seem to have become invaluable to the process. Like, none of it really could have happened if it was just bad apples in state captured, sort of positions, comrades who'd been deployed to these positions, and a president who was greedy, and a bunch of businessmen like the Guptas who were greedy. It also needed these guys in the middle to oil the wheels, and I find that they seem to be getting the least share of people's ire, and they probably deserve a whole lot more. Pums, what do you think?
No, I think that there's definitely a beginning of the boil. Like, people are actually beginning to boil around these things. But and I'm so glad you're here with us, Sheldon, today, because often we have these conversations, and you mentioned it also about coverage, and that media tends to then be beholden to like the big names. And I'm wondering what happens in the newsrooms. It's nice to have somebody who actually is in the newsroom, in the behind the scenes. I'd love to hear what happens in the newsroom, that when a report like this comes out, and to the eventual stories that you pick to put out there.
So, Pums, we're fortunate enough in the sense that we've got a big enough team. So just to, not to go too granular, but we've got a Fin24 team which looks after our finance and business, and a lot of it, as has been mentioned, are SOEs, are management consultants. It's really the heart of business. We've also got a breaking news team, your general news team, and then an in-depth team, has a bit more time and scope to really dig into something like this. So we really are fortunate, and I think there are very few newsrooms in the country who've got that capability to say, okay, cool, let's take this report. Look, it's just dropped. There is a need to report on it in the moment, to say, look, reflect that the report has dropped, the broad overviews, broad brushstrokes. These are some of the findings, and usually for that you go to the recommendations page. You look at, you scan the glossary, and you see which are the standout parts, right? And you'll have that go through, and you'll decide, look, how are we approaching it from a financial angle, from a business angle? How are we approaching it from a more news angle? Because state capture is so pervasive. It's not in one sector. And then you'll dig deep into it. I think for us, it's been our top story for the last 2 days, despite the report having come out, I think on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Tuesday evening. Despite the report coming out on Tuesday, there's so many pieces falling out. For instance, our political team, Gwede Mantashe is named specifically by the commission, saying, Jacob Zuma's bidding at Transnet, I think for Siyabonga Gama, was championed, and Gwede Mantashe is named, to say by Mantashe and other ANC leaders at the time. Now, we know from the ANC's own history that Gwede Mantashe has been a key figure in almost every presidency, right?
Right.
So that creates a headache for President Cyril Ramaphosa. So we then look at, what does this mean for Gwede Mantashe, right? In terms of the role he played. So yes, there may not have been any money exchange, but all of this was a championing, a creation in the mind of the people that, for instance, Siyabonga Gama was the best person for the job, when someone like Barbara Hogan patently said he is not. So going into those elements, and luckily we're fortunate enough, but not everyone is.
I'm also glad we've got you on for a number of reasons. I obviously I've followed you for many years, and there's lots and lots of breakthrough stuff, and you've been behind the scenes working hard on stories when you were just a reporter, and now obviously you have this responsibility at News 24. But I'm also interested in the follow up on these guys. Where the hell is Siyabonga Gama now, and what is he doing, and which school do his, not which school do his kids go to, because that's obviously the kind of information you don't want out there. But what kind of a lifestyle is he leading? And how can he have seemingly got away with having presided over a Transnet that so blatantly stole money, made bad decisions, bought the wrong trains, and seemingly I'm sure he's not living in poverty. I'm sure he's not been chased out of the public square. I'm sure that Siyabonga Gama continues to live a fairly plush, comfortable, luxurious life. I want to know what his life is like right now, and I want to know how he got away with it, because he clearly has. And no one's following up on that stuff. We need to know where he is. I've got a list of people. I want to know where Lynn. I want to know where Lynn Brown is. I mean, where's Lynn fucking Brown? Where's Malusi Gigaba? Where's
I think the question then.
Faith Mutambi, Des Van Rooyen. Where are these people? Because they were all big news once, and now it seems they're just living the life of Riley.
Yeah, I think the question is, why don't we see? Because that's what you get to do as a news paper or as a news outlet. You get to put in lights the names of people that we should be paying attention to. But then it seems that you then quickly forget and move on to the next thing, and we don't get a follow-up. Why not?
Look, I think to take that first one on the chin, I think we don't do enough as the media, and obviously as speaking as News 24, we don't do enough follow-ups, years down the line, whatever happened to this person, and something we try and do, and we definitely, take that feedback. I mean, I had that same thought about Lynn Brown and, reading the story on her yesterday. So that's definitely something we can do better on. One of the reasons we may not always get to it is just because the news cycle then just moves. So some of those people are in parliament,
But you're in charge of the news cycle, guys. You are in charge of the news cycle.
But Sheldon, I mean, listen, it's also an opportunity, because we know, wasn't it Siyabonga Gama they went to a site where they were building a house for him? Was it him? And he got all aggressive and chased people away and threw rocks at the journalist. It was one of those guys at Transnet, as I recall, who got very defensive because he was building a huge and very expensive house on an extremely expensive piece of land in Pretoria. Now, I mean, there's an opportunity here, obviously, because these guys are going to be horrified that you're still interested in them, and they may react very badly, and that itself becomes a news story. So there's some meat on the bones here. I'm just saying. Guys,
true news editor, Gareth, meat on the bone. No, but I take the point, and I think it's valuable criticism of how we sometimes quickly move on, and you forget about the Siyabonga Gama, and today it's someone else, you know.
I'm not criticizing you, and the whole news cycle is not your responsibility, Phumi. I don't think that's fair. But I do think
I'm talking about
there's an
media.
opportunity. There's an opportunity.
Media is in charge of the news cycle because they get to choose. You get to choose what we see and what we don't see, which then also leads us to, why don't we have the conversations about the banks? I mean, all of these people.
They were doing
receive this money in bank accounts. They transact via bank accounts, and nobody is having a conversation about how complicit the banks in this country and internationally have been in this entire state capture thing. I mean, Gareth, if you want to do something at the bank, you almost have to produce your breathing grandfather in order to prove you are who you are. And yet, why aren't we having that conversation?
All right. So, John, I want to ask you a couple of questions quickly. First of all, let's just talk. You've just taken over at the Institute of Race Relations. You guys publish all kinds of interesting reports, and I'm sure you have an agenda of things that you want to achieve there. Let me just ask you, as an observer and someone who's been in the NGO world, you were with the Naumann Stiftung before this. What are your feelings on these coalition governments down the line? I've noticed that Action SA is falling apart just like COPE did not so long ago. I know Herman Mashaba hasn't resigned from the party, but he's resigned as a member of the Joburg Council. We know Makosi Khoza has got her problems with them at the moment. A lot of people who voted for Action SA must be feeling exactly like I felt when I voted for COPE all those years ago, when Bazima Shilowa and Musiwa Lekota were busy fighting with each other. What's your take on Action SA and on coalition governments that we were all so hopeful would figure a way forward in these municipalities? What do you got to say about those?
Oh, this was great timing, Cliff, because I had a house alarm going off next door, just stopped. So I'll take this gap to come into the conversation. Thanks. So I think firstly, the coalition governments, that is not just threading a needle. I think it's threading a whole series of needles trying to get to them to work. And I think they've made it far further than we had any hope of expecting. For the DA-led coalition government to come into power in Johannesburg, I think surprised them as much as anybody else. That was a surprise. Then being able to get some of the votes through, despite all the shenanigans of the ANC and the EFF, is quite impressive. So they've threaded a few needles, but there's still a whole row of needles leading off into the distance that they still need to thread. So far, they've done really well, I think, and I hope they continue doing so, because they are a pilot case, a test case for what might happen in 2024 if these coalition parties manage to cobble together enough votes to challenge the ANC-EFF coalition at the polls. So what they're doing, the importance of what they're doing goes far beyond what happens in the cities like Johannesburg and Tshwane and Ekurhuleni. It really has national importance. We're watching very closely what's happening there. In the case of Action SA, I think it is too soon to write them off, but I do hear and also feel the echoes of the past in seeing some of the squabbles occurring within the party. I sense that there are some differences of opinion between Herman Mashaba maybe and some other members of the party, for example, around his friendliness with the EFF, which I'm not sure everybody else in the Action SA shares. It probably is not a bad idea to have promoted him out of Johannesburg city chambers into to the national level, where he really has an important role to play if Action SA wants to make a good showing in 2024. It might also allow the Johannesburg caucus to operate with a greater degree of cohesion and focus. So I think it's not entirely a bad thing what's happened there. The scenes in Tshwane of the, I think was it councillors or party members or a mix of the two squabbling, were very ungratifying and undignified, and I think did the image of the party no good at all. They did jump into damage control mode quite quickly, and really now they need to show that they are able to contain differences within the party and manage them in a democratic way without pushing, shoving, and fighting. But yeah, I think the coalitions are very important, and you really need to watch them very closely.
So let's just be practical and sensible for a moment and not go for the low-hanging fruit that is, clickbait and noise. What is your outlook, guys, especially because, we've got a budget coming up this month and everybody's talking about how the price of petrol is going up. We've got increases in electricity costs. The average South African is going to be paying more for food. There are a whole lot of other costs that have crept in here. Obviously, the Minister of Finance is now also going to have to look at how much the government's taking in and how much they are short. So we're looking at the economy more broadly. And what is your outlook for the South African economy going forward, particularly when we look internationally at the state of affairs in places like the United States, where inflation is about to take off and get very, very messy, and also end up costing the average consumer a huge amount more money. Their savings, if they have any, will be worth less at the end of this year than they were at the end of last year. And with coronavirus now firmly in the rearview mirror, because I think it's a given now that people just don't care anymore. In South Africa, you could argue that parts of South Africa have never cared from the get-go. What are your feelings on the economy? And what is your outlook for this year? If you were finance minister, what would you be thinking about? Sheldon, do you want to go first?
What would I be thinking about? I'd really be thinking about how to... I think we've got a massive infrastructure problem. Besides Eskom, our water infrastructure is creaking and about to go. Our roads, maybe not, well, there's the obvious, in terms of potholes, but in terms of networks and the fragility of the infrastructure, getting goods up from our ports to the rest of the country, and having goods move around, especially because our rail system, that's another infrastructure problem. So I would get the I would look at how do we get infrastructure going, because without infrastructure, you can't do anything without water, electricity, being able to move your goods. All of that is moot.
This is just an observation, but you started on the expenditure part rather than the income part. I mean, What do you think that the minister is toying with the idea? And John, I can see you smiling about this too, Phumi, toying with the idea of increasing VAT, increasing taxes, playing with the petrol price and those levies, because obviously people are on the bones of their backsides at the moment. We've got massive unemployment. We've got all of these underlying problems in the economy that are not going away. Before we get to spending, which I think is a valid point that Sheldon's making, especially in respect of infrastructure, which we do need to look at, the maintenance of infrastructure or the lack thereof is probably part of the reason we are where we are. But what do you think about the income side of things and what the minister may be plotting in terms of getting more of our money into his pocket?
Well, I think if you think of the old cartoons where sometimes the character would head into a canyon with narrowing walls and then finally get stuck and wouldn't be able to go forward and backwards, I think that's more or less the situation we find ourselves in South Africa. Because both the expenditure side is almost impossible to cut and the revenue side is very difficult to raise, short of windfalls like we've experienced during the past year, thanks to strong demand for commodities. But I think otherwise, the tax base is pretty much tapped out. We saw some statistics on the top two income categories in the tax statistics, declining by around 10% number of taxpayers in the past year. So I think on the revenue side, we're really pretty much stuck. On the expenditure side, there's not much we can do. And ultimately, the only way out of this mess is for the economy to grow. Because if you've got a growing economy, then you can collect more tax revenue. But that's another thing we haven't got. We've got a stagnant economy. And so my expectation is for the finance minister, he's in that canyon. He's gone all the way in, and now he's budged in there, and he can't move left or right or go backwards or forwards. And until we get some economic reforms that really trigger growth, that's not going to change. So my expectation for this year and for the coming years is that our economic situation will be pretty dire. And most of the indicators that we're tracking, like infrastructure, like Sheldon said, and other indicators, will continue to point in the same direction. It takes reforms to get out of this. It's the only way.
Phumi.
I've got more questions than answers.
Okay, well, bring your questions. Let's go. We've got two gentlemen who are well placed to answer these questions.
We last week we also spoke a little bit about this, and then at the end of the day, because the NPC was meeting, the first thing that came out of that meeting was interest rates. Yesterday, the petrol price, and the conversation about VAT is not going away. So it was a rumor. in certain WhatsApp groups. Sheldon, I'm sure if I could see you, I'm sure you'd be nodding. You must be part of those WhatsApp groups. But and it's that rumor's not going away. So I think we're all on tenterhooks around that. But a couple of days ago, I read about the loan that, remember, we've been talking about this loan that South Africa has gotten.
Yeah, it's
from the World
11,
Bank.
11 billion rand, I think it is.
And Sheldon, you speak about where we need to be spending just in terms of infrastructure, which everybody agrees we need to, we need to do the upgrades and we need to maintain in a lot of places. And then the rail network, we have to have an entire overhaul. And I was horrified to find that the bulk of that loan is to pay subscriptions. Pay for subscriptions to all our various kind of, like the UN subscriptions and all of these various councils that we sit in. I am blown away. And that was just, and I haven't read a lot more about that, and I haven't seen many more people making a big noise about that, because I think that is important, because that means there is a lot more that we're not being told about by our government, that we're not hearing about what's happening. That loan, guys, and the thing about the World Bank and those kinds of loans is the fact that when you fail to pay them back, which we are on a trajectory that says we are going to, the first places they ask you to cut your spending is in places like education in your country. The first places where they ask you to cut are actually the places that we desperately need in order to be able to grow our country, to grow our economy, to have any chance of ever being able to repay any of those loans. So I'm just saying, there's a lot more here that we're not.
People. I think it was Enoch Godongwana who said, "Oh no, there are no conditions attached to this loan." like someone just come along in the World Bank or the IMF.
It's a loan, not a grant.
Yeah, that's the point. They don't give you anything without having some conditions attached. And the most basic condition is you're going to have to pay this back at some point. So it puts us in hock. And the person who's owed the money eventually ends up dictating the terms. So what do we have to look forward to there, John? And why the hell are we paying subscriptions to international organizations that don't seem to do terribly much for us?
Yeah, I mean, that loan was so weird. I read the press release when it was announced, and I was trying to figure out what the money was for. But the press release said it was for infrastructure development, for the economic reconstruction, for COVID relief, to fight climate change. And it was a list of about 6 things. And you're like, but what is this for? And what also concerned me about it is that we've already got this very high debt burden in South Africa as a nation. We're adding to that debt burden. We're making it higher. And in a way, you can justify it if you say this is a low interest loan, and you do like what you do when you do your debt consolidation. You take all your expensive debt and you pay it off with cheaper debt, so your interest rate comes down. That's what we could have done with that loan. Take those 11 billion rand at low interest and use it to pay off some of the expensive debt. It would have brought our interest load down. I mean, it was a relatively small amount in the greater context of.
But you mentioned something else. Like governments have learned, and Sheldon, you brought up infrastructure, so I'm going to blame you for this. But governments have also learned, and thanks to the US, I mean, they're doing this with that Build Back Better bill, which hasn't been passed, and which is unlikely to be passed because they're two Democrats. They're 2 Democrat senators who are just not going to be swayed because they come from purple states. That whole bill was also sold to the public or sold to Congress as an infrastructure plan. Infrastructure seems to be a word that includes things that have nothing to do with bridges, pipes, electricity, all the things that actually are infrastructure. Infrastructure seems to be a very convenient category for big government to spend on all kinds of third rail projects that they're interested in. And that's precisely what we see happening here, right?
Before you answer, Sheldon, I don't have many Margaret Thatcher favorite quotes, but this one is one of my favorites, that, governments talk about infrastructure where the rest of us just drive on roads.
It's true. It's true. It's you've distilled it quite perfectly. It's roads, it's bridges, it's things that get your water. I think, where there's a stimulus problem, a creation of an infrastructure bill, is government's hope that through spending we will grow the economy, because you're hoping that businesses Well, legally,
it's stimulus.
Win tenders, yes, and stimulate the economy through other means, as opposed to in the US's case, through the Fed. This is through government spending. It's large spending.
Trickle down effect. What you hope for is that there's a trickle down effect.
It's a hope. It's a hope.
Well,
America hasn't got to that stage.
I'm tired of hearing this. What government need to do if they want to stimulate the growth that John's talking about is get out of the fucking way. I mean, why are we still having this conversation? We have so much red tape. If you want to start a business, if you want to employ people, it's so damn difficult at the moment in South Africa that no one wants to. They'd rather do it across the border, either in, Botswana or Namibia or, frankly, Zimbabwe at this point, because you probably have less red tape involved. And if not that, you start your business by registering it in Mauritius, so you don't have the tax burden that South Africans have to put up with. So there's a no-win situation for people who are the only people empowered to start the economy up and to grow it, small business owners. Big business is already in league with government. We know that, right, John? Just nod your head if you agree with me. Big business in league with government.
Yes,
the trade unions in league with government. We're hemmed in by all these people who say they're going to manage the economy, and they have already proven over the last 20 years that they cannot manage this economy. Get out of the way. Let small businesses do their thing. That's the only way we'll grow it. That's the only way we'll be able to pay for all your bloody thieving.
Well, I think somebody needs to speak up in defense of infrastructure because I do love infrastructure. I think it's wonderful. And I love railways and water networks.
Let it be you, John. Go ahead.
Get
yes,
it.
And infrastructure is great. Exactly. Okay. I'll tell you why. So there was a very good report in 2005 from the Free Market Foundation called Habits of Highly Effective Countries. And I recommend that you go and read it. You would expect that the Free Market Foundation, doing its research, is going to come to the conclusion that the state should do pretty much nothing, and the private sector should do pretty much everything. And that is sort of a very market-friendly way of looking at things. I'm very sympathetic to that. But what they did find is that there are a couple of areas where state spending can actually improve economic growth, which is ultimately the outcome that you want. And one of those areas is infrastructure, another is health, and another is education. So if you're getting bang for buck in those areas, that does actually pay for itself. But as I think, Sheldon, you've pointed out, this is not quite the situation we're in. We have this very strong suspicion as South Africans of long standing that large amounts of money being spent on infrastructure are going to end up in the wrong pockets, and we're going to end up with bad infrastructure. They're going to save on the tar, they're going to save on the trains, they're going to buy the wrong size of trains. The power plants will be too big and they won't start working. And we see it across the board. We're spending so many billions on infrastructure and we're just not getting very good value for it. And I think, that's a sign of just state dysfunction really in South Africa.
All right, let's look at some other things, because I brought this up with Phumi this morning. There's the census going around. Now, I'm never excited.
Going around.
Well, it's starting today, right, Phumi? Like we can fill it in online if we want to fill it in online, or we can wait for them to come knocking on the door. I'm extremely suspicious of anybody wanting more information about me than they already have. SARS has got all the information they need as far as I'm concerned. My municipality knows that I'm a voter in this district. That's all they need to know. Now, Phumi is trying to convince me that this is a good idea because she works, you explain your situation with the KZN villages and the water that you're arranging for them, and you work with NGOs, and you need this information, the census information, so that you can figure out how many people live in this area and how many people you need to figure into the equation. But
talk about that infrastructure planning. How many schools?
Okay, fair enough. But I don't like the idea that somewhere in all of this census stuff is written, and Phumi only dropped this in right at the end. She says, oh, but you have to comply. It's like the police. If they come knocking on your door, you have to let them into your house. So do I have to do this, and should I be suspicious of it, or am I just being rebellious and childish?
Childish. I've had my go, guys. I've had my go. You it's your turn to try and convince him.
I'll give you my 2 cents is that in addition to being a lover of infrastructure, I also love data and statistics. You may know the Institute of Race Relations publishes a 900-page compendium of stats on South Africa every year. It's an amazing thing, and that wouldn't be possible if you didn't do data gathering, including in censuses. Also, when I was with Good Governance Africa, we used to do African statistics. And it was always terribly disappointing when you got the statistics from a country, you saw that last been updated in 1970, and you're like, but hell, you don't even know how many people live in that country. You know, you don't even properly know the size of the economy. You don't know how well they're doing. You don't know anything about them. And that's very disappointing. I do want to know things about the world. So I'm taking part in the census for that, you know, because I benefit from what they're doing.
And Stats say and Palilo Khotla were actually quite instrumental in creating an Africa-wide statistics council, so that there were more censuses done across the continent, and so that we're able to. Even last week I was saying, because what we actually want, what growing a South African economy looks like, is it also looks like all our neighbors being functional, so that we can grow the number of people that are available to be customers and consumers and business partners, and that's what we need. And statistics is part of how all of that happens.
Sheldon,
Okay, Sheldon.
Anything you want to add to the census? I mean, have you already gone on and put your info in?
I wouldn't go so far as calling you names, Gareth. I mean, so let me just put that out there. I mean, I think, you know, no, but on a serious.
Okay, you can come back on the show.
Yeah, I think it is indicative of you know, privacy of our information, and as you know, government has enough of our information.
Yeah.
Although, and now I'll be the newsman who sits on the fence. Although, you know, we've got a dearth of data in South Africa and Africa, and we need to fill those holes for us to build on top of that. I think there's a lot that we simply don't know, because we have a lot of people who are either, you know, are away from centers where naturally data and technology gather, you know, and hence are unseen. And I think that for me is the important part, you know, as we said, you know, so you could understand how many schools we need in a certain area, and other type of projects within limits, you know, and in terms of, you know, what people feel that government is sharing with them, you know. I think there's a genuine concern in the age that we're in about, you know, what's being done with all this information. How much do they have about it? Why do they need all of this?
Although I do want to say, you know, Gareth, one of the things that, even with the comments that we saw this morning when we were talking about the census and the information gathering, is what you are displaying and what you're showing is you're showing the kind of breakdown in trust that the South African populace actually has with our government. And this is the blowback of things like corruption, of things like non-delivery, of things like not holding the executive accountable, people not being, you know, on not having justice delivered on many different levels, whether it's with corruption or whether it's with crime itself. What this is indicative of that. There is a fundamental breakdown in our society of what we believe in our government will, can, should do, and what our part of that contract is. You see, by not upholding their part of the contract, what they have done, is on the other side, people like you and all of the comments that we got.
I don't want to help anymore. Yeah.
That's what it is. It's a breakdown of that contract. And unfortunately what that is it also then shows that the rock and the hard place, or that narrowing, I think it's a really lovely analogy. That narrowing passage is really where we are. We're so far down that line, because it is a
John,
a two-way.
You sent this to me. I feel somewhat reprimanded by the three of you, but here's a book that John actually has alerted me to by Morton Durban, which is called Poor Numbers: How We Are Misled by African Development Statistics and What to Do About It. So this is a book that anyone who's interested in this subject may want to read, and thank you for sending that to me, John. I'll have a look at that, because again, if we're not going to get the right information, how are we going to be able to address the problem? Fair enough. I'm going to consider myself reprimanded. Okay, so a couple of other things on the agenda. Let's just talk about
reprimanded.
No, it's right. It's
have
fine.
we swayed you?
I'm not hurt.
Even more enlightened.
Yeah, there we go. You guys are all number crunchers. You enjoy this, so you're better at this than me. And
Also,
I'll
where
take,
do we find that 900-page compendium?
yeah, well, there we go. Yes, Phumi wants to read it from cover to cover. That's how she is. Can we get it off your website, John?
Yes, you can get it off the Center for Risk Analysis website, cra-sa.com. I'll pop a link in the chat. Maybe you can put that up somewhere.
I will put it up. Let's just talk about the Chief Justice job for a second, because that seems to be everyone's obsession at the moment. I was quite impressed by Judge Meyer, who's the Judge President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, yesterday. Saying I'm impressed by a judge is something that we don't want to hear people saying too much in South Africa. Judges should be kind of just in the background doing their thing, getting on with it. But the judiciary has become a part of the national conversation, whether it wants to or not. Recently, the comments by Lindiwe Sisulu have dragged the judiciary into places that perhaps they shouldn't be involved in. And this is also a contentious area. If judges shut up about politics, in return, we will not criticize their judgments or them personally. And it's kind of a bargain that we have with the judiciary. But do you guys have any point of view? Our last Chief Justice was political and said quite a lot. It happens to be a lot of stuff that we might agree with in this case, but it could quite easily go the other way.
Today is the deadline for him to apologize. You remember a couple of weeks ago, today is the deadline. Is he going to apologize?
It could quite easily go the other way. If we have an activist Chief Justice and that Chief Justice ends up mouthing off about everything political, it does put the judiciary in a very awkward position, and something which they perhaps shouldn't be involved in. Now, what are your feelings on the choice of Chief Justice, and not just on the person who takes the job, but on what that job entails and whether we should be changing the nature of that job? The Constitution's very clear about what a Chief Justice is there to do, but more and more things seem to have been added to that in an era of state capture. What do you guys feel about that? And we'll start with you, Sheldon.
Gareth, I think that the role needs leadership, and I don't just mean that superfluously or in the general sense, but based on what you said and our most recent Chief Justice, because you're not just speaking up for yourself, right? And I mean, some people even raised the Deputy Chief Justice or Acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo's press conference in reaction to Lindiwe Zulu as raising it as one such action, to say, should you be doing that? Because you're not only making your job harder, but the people that you're ultimately leading. So their judgments are called into question. And we know, there are certain sections of our society who, as soon as a judgment goes against them, or the judiciary as a whole is tainted. There's cash exchanging hands. But if it goes in their favor, great judge. So I think that the whoever the Chief Justice is has to be aware of that. Has to be aware of some of the limitations that certain positions bring with the office that you occupy. You can't necessarily mouth off on something, yes, that you may feel strongly about, but if it's outside of your purview, or if it would have the impact of bringing into question all the people who work under you, for what you've done, is I think somewhat short-sighted. If it's defending the integrity of the body, I think that you've got more leeway and more scope, and I think the judiciary has come to play such a critical role in saving South Africa, as we've seen in the last 10 years. So that certainly, I think, has elevated the position. But in doing that, it's not a free-for-all. You can't just go out and mouth, and there's certain, that's why there's
if you'd asked people who Arthur Chaskelson was back in, I don't know, 1995-6, they would have probably not been able to answer you. And he was a great Chief Justice. He was our first Chief Justice. Maybe they would have recognized him from the swearing-in ceremony of Nelson Mandela. But he never commented on politics. And I thought that maybe that was a better model. Obviously, as state capture rolled around, it was incumbent on everyone in the various branches of government to state that they were for or against. And Chief Justice Mogoeng, to his credit, took a stand. But I don't know if that's what we want as the de rigueur policy of any Chief Justice. What do you say, John?
Well, I think, the separation of powers is very, very important in making a democracy work. Inevitably, there'll be some blurring of the boundaries between the politics and the legal system. I think that really can't be avoided. And it is. Sorry, is that noise coming from me? Okay, but it is in a way, it is a fiction that you can maintain complete neutrality and isolation of the legal system from the politics. Can't really do that. But I think it is important to maintain that fiction and to come as close as possible to the ideal. And in that sense, I think it is better if judges refrain from commenting on the politics, because just consider the situation where a case comes before a judge who has made pronouncements that lead the one way or the other. You'd be worried about whether that judge was going to give you a fair trial and a fair hearing. So judges really need to remain above the fray, and I think they do need to stay out of the politics.
It's not just the politics. It's not just the politics. Judges should refrain from drawing any type of attention to themselves and their views on anything, not even Big Brother, because cases might come before them. And when you have been publicly cited as stating a particular thing, it is very difficult for us to then believe that you have been impartial, that you have weighed the merits of the case against the law. That's it was just.
I think Jacob Zuma used this a couple of times, didn't he? Where he would sort of ask for judges to recuse themselves because he thought he wasn't going to get a fair trial because they'd said something about Zuma in the past. And I think the guiding light always has to be the law.
It's DCJ that he was trying, and now it's the advocate that he's trying to get through out of the case. But it's just, and that is it is for that reason that I think there is still a certain level of decorum that goes with particular professions, and sometimes social media fame is not what you are looking for. It's just sometimes you don't want to be a TikTok sensation.
Yes.
So I've driven this agenda on these points quite hard, but you guys obviously have things that you want to talk about. So in the last sort of 10 minutes or so, Sheldon, what are you guys interested in your newsroom at the moment? And what are the stories that you feel need to get more attention and that the public are most interested in?
Gareth, I think the one that's come to light, and we saw it with the return of as you put it, the de facto ending of COVID, with back to schools, lighter restrictions and the like. I think is the return to schools and the impact that it's had. There was a fascinating report that's come out, and we reported on it this morning, but there's a whole lot more work to do. There's getting onto the ground as well. I think the return to school is so important and so fundamental to the fabric of society that what you've seen is a further widening of that gap between the haves and the have-nots, because due to access to technology, access to resources, better facilities, better teachers, private schools have carried on. Private schools and your former Model C schools in suburbs have carried on by and large. And I think it's you could grade these things, but what they're starting to find, for instance, one of the findings out of the study done by Professor Nick Spall and his team is that 10-year-olds in 2021, and the survey was done in the same school, 10-year-olds in 2021 know less than 9-year-olds did in 2018. And that's just one indication of the impact of COVID-19, and then obviously the subsequent handling of the education system. They've been called for quite some time to end rotational teaching. Instead of going to school on every second day, have all the kids go back and rather work on getting better protection.
Well, you brought it up, Sheldon, but I want to just refer back to something that I put up on the screen earlier, that Johns Hopkins University's just put out a new study that's concluded global lockdowns have had a much more detrimental impact on society than they've produced any benefit, with researchers urging that they're ill-founded and should be rejected as a pandemic policy statement. This is not surprising to me. I was anti-lockdowns from the beginning. Are we going to get an apology from all the media organizations that were touting this as a solution to all of our problems and were hugely pro-lockdown from the beginning. Even political parties, Sheldon. It's not just you guys in the media, and I use that I use that brush broadly. Obviously, you may have had personal opinions that were different, but are we going to get apologies from all the political parties, including the DA, who suddenly just before the municipal election said they were against lockdowns, but up to then had been completely with the ANC and all the other parties, massively supportive of lockdowns? All the media organizations telling us this is a good thing, getting experts on who would back that position. Now that we can look with the benefit of hindsight at this situation and see how damaging it was, you cite the situation with school kids, masks, all this ridiculousness that has put people back and has ruined lives and has caused job losses in the hundreds of thousands. Are we going to get anyone going back and saying, okay, maybe we got this wrong?
Gareth, I think you know the answer to that. I think I don't think there's going to be much introspection. Let's be honest. And where there is, people may say, and all of those groups that you mentioned, media
it was
and
worth
saying,
a try.
It was yes, at the time, this is what we what we thought. We've now learned. We've learned more, and we know how this disease impacts people, and how to balance off the health risks with any other risks that you may have. So I doubt that, but I do think it is going to be fascinating and interesting and key for us to unpack that, to say, look, if this does happen again, and there's been scientific research to show. Do you think
this has affected your business? Do you think that the news business has lost credibility broadly? If we watch TV news, there were all this alarmist stuff that was going on every night about the number of cases, which clearly in retrospect didn't matter. It was the number of deaths that we were really interested in. Do you think there's going to be a cost to the media business in general in terms of credibility?
What I think credibility may well be, you may need longer to see that impact. I do think, though, that what has happened is, I think people have been overburdened with the negative news, and by negative I mean whether it's reporting factually on death and things that were key to report on, so that you almost see trends following lockdowns and COVID. And once COVID is no longer a factor. So let's say you're in level 1, and our transmission rates are really low, and life is open and flowing again. People want to go back to normal, and I think anything else is almost blocked out. So I do think from that perspective, you can very much see the trends and the data and the analytics of it all.
I promise I didn't bring you on here to have to drag you through that stuff. There was other stuff that we've covered that was much more important. But John, before we shut down this conversation, and we've got like a couple of minutes left, what are your chief prerogatives at the IRR, and what are you most interested in terms of current affairs, news, research at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of our research agenda, what we're really interested in is to continue to understand the South African environment and to come up with policy proposals that can help us get out of this narrow canyon that we're stuck in. But in terms of a personal interest, and I think also an organizational interest, we're really looking at the global stage quite intensely in terms of very high asset prices in the United States. Bond prices are high, house prices are high, equities are high. But if you look at consumer sentiment, there was a survey from the University of Michigan that came out this week. It's actually pretty low. And I think the reason for that is that American consumers are sensing that these markets are all too high, and many of them are actually not invested in those asset markets. So they're being left behind by this increase in value. That is a bubble, and that bubble is going to burst at some point, I think. And it's probably going to burst when rising interest rates drive down the value of those assets. And so this is sort of the big storm that we're seeing on the horizon, and that makes us worried about South Africa, because our captain of the ship seems to be carousing on the deck instead of looking ahead to see what's coming and battening down the hatches and doing all the other things that you have to do on a ship when a storm is coming.
Well, the captain of this ship is certainly not someone who Phumi likes to hold in high esteem. She's a regular critic of our captain of our ship. Not you, Phums. No, never. And I think a lot of people are just disappointed in this guy. He's just so average at everything. Cyril is just such an ordinary person. And we love to demonize Jacob Zuma, and I'm afraid that too many people in the beginning of his tenure thought they could lionize Cyril Ramaphosa. He is just the most ordinary person that you could possibly wish to have in that job. He's done nothing impressive whatsoever. He's squandered opportunities through COVID and through taking over the ANC. And Pums, I know this is how you feel. Do you want to add anything else before we wrap it up?
But Cyril still gets very good reviews. Hey, people still write good stories about Cyril. Still have a good story to tell. He still gets so Cyril still gets favorable reporting. Cyril still gets favorable polling. Cyril still listen. Don't shoot the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger.
For being a placeholder.
And the fact that there are still quite a lot of people who still view Cyril as the best option.
Yeah, you must see the favorability ratings in our polling. Cyril is the most popular politician in South Africa by far. So 60% favorability, much higher than the ANC. And one theory of why this is because people think that Cyril is the one protecting them from the government. So the whole rest of the government is terrible, and the party is terrible, and there's only Cyril holding the fort. He's the only one protecting us. That's
in the land of the blind, the one-eyed is king. This is what good Lord. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. Sheldon, I really appreciate your time. John, it's great to have you on for the first time. Both of you, I'm sure we haven't heard the last of either of you, and please keep doing the good work that you're both doing in your various ways, shapes, and forms. Just to throw this in, because John did send me the link. If anyone is interested in that huge report, Phumi, this is especially for you. Here is the web address, cra-sa.com, and you can find the IRR's report. There we go. Phumi's already there. You see, she is such a stats nerd. She's going to go and look at this. Phumi's already filled in her census information. So if you want to join her, you can do that too today. Very much a pleasure to have Sheldon Morais and John Endres on this morning. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Phumi. And we will see you tomorrow, 6 a.m., bright and early. Cheers.